Hey, what's up, psychos? Welcome to another episode of Take Your Pills, Psychopath, the comedy podcast that exploits mental illness for personal profit. What? Trademark. I'm your host, John F. O'Donnell, J. Fod. I hope everybody's doing well out there in this crazy ass world. I'm doing all right. Keeping busy, feeling good, doing my thing, my little mental health routines, you know what I mean? Monitoring my sleep patterns, making sure I'm doing yoga, eating a low inflammation diet and whatnot, doing my stand-up comedy, which is a great version of art therapy for me. So I'm cool. I'm doing all right. I hope you all out there are doing well. I appreciate you listening. Just some housekeeping up top. Best way to connect with me is to join my newsletter at jfodnews.com if you're not already on it. You get a reminder about the podcast. You get other additional stories. I let you know when new YouTube videos are up, and it's just nice to it's just nice dopamine little drip for me. It's a little nice dopamine hit when I see somebody join my newsletter. So if you could do that, just do the free version. It's cool. Also, we got the Patreon rocking now. If you sign up for the Patreon, you get a bonus episode every week. Another episode of Take Your Pills, Psychopath, an exclusive episode where I scour the interwebs for the newest, most interesting information that's going on in the land of psychology. And I go through the pieces and I give colorful, oh so very colorful commentary. And it's just a great way to support me. So check out patreon.com/jfod, JFOD. And if you can afford to, please support me there. And last thing I'll plug is my YouTube channel is content's going up on there a lot. So you can go just type in John F. O'Donnell and you can support me there by subscribing. So I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. And let's keep growing this community. But I am so excited for today's guest. She's great. She's going to open up about all sorts of things, and it's just really appreciated. And I'm not even gonna say ahead of time what we're gonna talk about, so you can organically get into it. She's a great comedian, great performer, and somebody who I appreciate that I get to call a friend. How's it going? It's Kelly Bachman. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's funny. Like, I just did the whole intro to the podcast in front of you. You know what I mean? And we've been hanging out for about 15, 20 minutes before this started. But now I tried to create the sense of like an organic hello. But I can't sell out my audience like that. So I had to just kind of be real about it.
No, it's good to be honest. We already know that each other are doing well or doing fine or whatever we said earlier.
Yes, we do. But specifically, well, I guess, I was going to say, how are you? You're doing well.
Sure.
How's your week going? We talked about that a little bit.
Yes. Well, the main thing is I'm getting ready for this show. I'm recording an album with my friend at the end of what will be this week when y'all hear this. And that is Rape Victims Are Horny Too, a musical comedy about healing from trauma.
Such a great title.
The title definitely says a lot.
Yeah.
I just posted it in my work Slack inviting everyone, and I was like, well, there's not really a way to make this safe for work.
Yeah. It's NSFW. Is that the letters?
Yeah.
What was I going to say? So you have this impending huge taping coming up, which is so exciting. And it's like a funny show. It's a vulnerable show. It's all of the things that make a performance great. And this is what you're focusing on right now.
Yeah, it's kind of taking up all of my free time, which is a little bit of self-torture, but also I feel a lot of... I feel like a sense of purpose around the show, or like I really feel connected to it in a big way. And I'm a rape survivor, and so is my comedy partner, and that's what the show is about. And so to spend a lot of hours working on it sort of is like inviting my brain to just think about that for days and days and days. And sometimes when you're doing that, you don't really realize that you've gone down like a trauma rabbit hole. you're not really separating the two things, like, of like the regular like obsessive workflow of an artist getting excited about something, and the intrusive thoughts of post-traumatic stress disorder, today's topic.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so that's super interesting. So, as you're kind of forced to ruminate on and scurry down rabbit holes about traumas in order to flesh out the show, in order to focus on the show, in order to tighten up the show, do you find that that leads to the intrusive thoughts and potential spiraling out, while at the same time, in a weird way, also having a level of catharsis by working through it?
Yeah, there is a huge catharsis when I get through it, but it is kind of like, it's like making the choice to go through, to take the route of going through hell to get out, which is not the only route to deal with trauma, to really process through it, or there's different ways people kind of do, like, I don't know, like almost like exposure therapy to like going through their memories, or not. Yeah, some people do exposure, and other people will literally talk about what happened to them and kind of try to make it normal for their brain to talk about. But for me, I'm really trying to remember how I was feeling years ago, because I am at a very different point in my healing now, and I know what the show would mean to this younger version of me who was at a different stage of healing. And I really want to make sure I'm kind of speaking to that person and hitting on the things that were important to her. And whenever I speak to a survivor, which survivors come up to me a lot because I talk about this stuff. So when I'll talk to a survivor about their experience, and maybe they're at a different phase, it will remind me of my experience. So that's like a little bit triggering. But in some ways it can happen in a positive way, where then I'm like, oh, yes, I used to be like that. I'm going to go find that journal and read it, the journal I wrote where I felt like that, and try to remember what the sentiment that was important to me then was. Because now that I know I'm going to record this, it's so important to me to do right by survivors, and I keep wanting to kind of make sure I'm saying the kind of quote, like, right thing, or like wanting to make sure I'm not missing something that is hugely important. But I know that's like just an anxious instinct, because you don't have to say everything in one show, and I don't have to like cover every aspect of surviving. It's a comedy show, but I find that's where like the trauma brain wants to go, is like the rabbit hole of, okay, if I can just say everything, then it will be what, like, okay, like I don't know what my, that part of my brain is trying to. I think people who have PTSD, sometimes your brain is like trying to fix a problem that is no longer actively happening. So your brain is basically going into survival mode, like, and the way my brain does that is kind of rabbit holing, like rattling off. Like I'm probably doing it right now a little bit.
No, this is wonderful and so insightful, and I guess I wanted to ask. Okay, so that's so interesting. So it's basically you want to make sure that this show is resonating with folks who are in different stages of healing from as a survivor.
Right. Well, the show is ultimately for survivors. So it's great when we hit points that are important to people who are not survivors. It's great when we raise awareness about something, or kind of have a kind of learning moment in the show, or whatever might happen naturally. But the show ultimately is for survivors, because I've seen a lot of comedy about rape that is not for survivors, and I've seen a lot of TV shows that include rape, and I've seen a lot of content, I guess, that is really triggering for survivors. And the hope for the show is not that it's, it doesn't trigger anyone, because you never know what's going to trigger someone. But we want the show to feel good for survivors and to feel like a positive experience, because that's what it was for us. Like Dylan and I, when we wrote the show together, it was really healing for us. We were laughing together. We felt less alone. We felt like we were taking this power of our own stories and really sharing it together in a way, like, even when I've made jokes about trauma by myself, they don't always feel good, in the sense that I'm alone up there. Like, so if I'm bombing on my trauma by myself, it's like a different feeling than when Dylan and I have a bad show and we get to go laugh about it afterward. Like, we're friends, and we kind of want to share that experience with the audience, because even before meeting each other, that's the experience that we've found in our own lives. Like, for me, that was the most transformative experience of healing, was meeting other survivors, or realizing that people I knew were also survivors, and especially getting to a point of laughing about it. Like, the first time I heard a comedian make a joke about their own experience, it was like almost like a religious experience for me. I actually found this document in I was going through all my written journals, or all my typed up journals. I actually recently burned all my journals on fire, but that's another story.
Yeah, maybe we can address that later. The purging of the journals via fire, via flame.
That's what happens when you go too deep into the journals.
Yes. Sometimes they need to be burned so the phoenix can fly out of the ashes.
I think that was a positive thing I did, but
good.
But I used to journal on Microsoft Word, so I found my old journals, and I was first digging up. I had these within my journal. Most of the journals were dated. They're just the dates is the title of the file, but there were 3 journals that had word titles instead of dates. And I kind of knew those were going to be like something like trauma related, because trauma is it's almost like, even the way I was organizing on Microsoft Word is very much what PTSD is like, because PTSD is not linear the way it is experienced in your body. Like, it's not, your brain and your body do not know what time it is, and they do not know what day it is. And when you're in a PTSD episode, your body is like, oh, it's actually 1993 and I am having like the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of ground your body to like bring yourself back to reality of, you're safe right now. That's not happening right now. And that's a lot of what dealing with PTSD is. But that's why I thought it was interesting that these were not titled documents. Dated documents, I mean, so I don't know exactly when they were from, but I can guess, because one of them was titled like, I can never share this, or something like, I can never post this. And it was just me writing this, like, I keep trying to write something like this again. I'm debating whether it's useful for me to discuss this. Will it help me feel better? Will it help another victim to feel validated? Will it help someone in denial realize that someone else is telling the truth? I'm not sure. Though I know that what has given me the most strength in the years is the realization that my story is not a personal problem. I still remember when I first found stories. For me, I found them on a Tumblr blog called I Believe You and It's Not Your Fault. And I literally made a Tumblr it was people posting their experiences, and then some angel person responds and says, that, yes, we believe you, it's not your fault, or I believe you. And I made a Tumblr just to post my experience on this blog
Wow.
because I felt so confused and alone, and I didn't know who to talk to. And
Yeah.
then I had another note, like, kind of like, can't share this either. And I like opened that. It's another one, kind of me trying to write like a Me Too. I literally just couldn't even get up the, I don't want to say courage, but I couldn't get myself to even say like hashtag Me Too when people were doing that. Like, I really was so, I couldn't, I was trying to figure out why to do it, like whether I was doing it for me or for other people. So I was writing about it a lot, and I wanted to help other people feel less alone, but also I really wanted to feel less alone. And
Yeah.
then I would kind of look to like my public heroes for them to say what I needed to hear, and nobody was saying it. So I kind of, like, in 2017 or 2018, after like a couple of like famous comics I really looked up to said some really disappointing things about the Me Too movement, I started seeking out Survivor comics. Like, I wasn't even doing stand up yet myself, but I was seeking out the comics that were, and I was trying to make a documentary about them and like them telling their jokes. And I produced a show called Rape Jokes by Survivors, where I found as many comics as I could, and I literally like invited comics to an open mic to try to like encourage people to tell their jokes if they were unsure about like what my whole deal was with like doing this show. And
Yeah.
I it was sort of, it was one of the first things I did in comedy was this show, and I was still so like, I almost had like imposter syndrome as a survivor. Like, I wasn't like, let alone as a comic, like I was very like hiding behind the scenes. But the document I found this week that was really interesting to me was, it was a document that was called something like show intro in case the host drops out. It
Oh,
was
and
like me,
if you had to go on
if
stage.
I like had to go on stage like to save the show.
Yeah.
Because some people, and that might have been a possibility just because a lot of people involved in the show were sort of like unsure about it. You're dealing with people that have trauma,
Yeah.
and you're like asking them to do something really vulnerable.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But what I wrote in the document was really interesting to me because it's so like, knowing that I'm a comic now and I have a whole show that's like me talking about this stuff. It says, the first thing it says is, I've got a fever onset from my PTSD, and the only cure is more rape jokes. And then it says, I'm not sure how you properly hype up a rape show. If you're a survivor in the house, put your hands up. If you're a survivor in the house, put your hands up.
Yeah.
And then I said, no, that's not it. And then I said, what can I say? Hey, everyone. Wow, this is cool. Rape is not cool, but this is... I'm like trying to come up with how to intro the show.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then,
it's like a very challenging thing to try to pull off. I mean, a lot of this resonates with me in terms of me talking about mental health and mental illness on stage and publicly, and how challenging that was for me to figure out how to make it work through the medium of comedy, to talk about it the way that I wanted to talk about it, for it to be healing in that respect, and for me to feel less isolated about it, with it connecting with other people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it was... Well, before I was doing stand-up, I was writing... I was writing sketch and directing sketch, and I also was working in film production and writing screenplays. And I was already hitting on this stuff a lot when I was writing, but I was sort of hiding behind other people a lot. I didn't see myself as a performer, and also I would try to get away from it, like in terms of attaching it to my own identity. But then it's so a part of my coming of age experience that it was sort of hard to dodge when I was writing. But
Yeah.
I was sort of wanting these other comics like to be my champion in a way. I don't know how else to like. I kept looking for people like that would say the things that I wanted to say rather than saying them myself.
Yeah.
But in this document is literally, I didn't even know that I put this in here years ago. I thought I had written it more recently. But there's a joke I have in here that I say as I'm coming up with how to intro the show. I say, I remember the first moment that I started to feel good other than when someone actually believed me was when I found a way to laugh about it with another survivor. We were at a party, and I had a PTSD moment as this guy was trying to flirt with me, and I just started singing, "You remind me of a rape that I once knew. When I look into your eyes, you rape me too. And that's why I just can't ever make eye contact with anyone again." But that joke is in my show with Dylan.
Yeah.
Like that's in our show. And our whole show is stuff like that. It's like these musical parodies and it's stand up as well. But I kind of forgot the origin was I and Dylan did this himself in his own life before we met. And this is sort of a lot of what bonded us was I was always like riffing in this nervous way about my PTSD and doing little like 10-second parodies of things. Like that was in college when I said that to somebody and I remember like making little nervous songs up like I'm every victim, we've all been raped when just when people were asking me a lot of questions about my experiences and like it was like a nervous thing that made me feel better. And then when Dylan and I met, he was at an open mic. We were both at an open mic. He did his joke. He has a joke where he says, "This morning I took a poop so big it was triggering." And then I was doing one of my jokes, like that's also like a singing rape joke. And we basically were like, hey, we should do an hour of this.
That's so great. I mean, I feel like the topic is still so shrouded that it makes people feel so uncomfortable, even though unfortunately it's such a pervasive thing, that for you guys to tackle that and figure out how to present it in a funny way, but not in a way where you're undermining yourself or you're punching down at survivors, is an incredibly worthwhile thing to do.
Well, thank you. We're really proud of it, and I just have what I've been reflecting on a lot this week, and it's sort of what got me like rabbit holing as well, but like I just have realized how important it's been to me for years to see a show like this, and now we've been working on it for like 2 years, but it was probably 5 years ago that I first wanted a show like this to exist, but I never thought it would be me being in it. And was made me kind of emotional to look back, and I'm glad that there are some journals that I wasn't able to burn, because then I can
Kelly told me that she thought she burned all of her journals, you psychos, but then there were a few that were deep underneath the bed.
Okay, I feel like everyone needs some context, or maybe they don't, because this is like we're all in the same boat. But a few weeks ago or a month ago, me and my friend were gonna like have a fire on the full moon, try to do a little tarot,
Get a little woo.
Just see what's going on.
Just a little woo woo.
And that's not something I had really engaged with before, but we were like, yeah, we'll do a little mushrooms.
Yeah, throw some mushrooms into the mix.
And which all people have, a lot of people have said that mushrooms are really good for PTSD, actually. But yeah, we were gonna make a fire, and I said, you know what might be cathartic is I will burn a couple of my journals from the last year, and we can like use them as like the beginning kindling of the fire. And so I
Nice.
brought my like I have a big bag of journals, like 30 journals. I was like, I'll pick two, and we'll read pages from it, and we can burn them. And then we, I can't even blame the mushrooms for this or anything. It was just like once I started burning a journal, I was like, oh, let's burn it all. I just wanted to burn it all, and not like
Not in like
not
a
in like a mean way.
not in like a pyromaniac way.
No, I don't think so. It was like, and it wasn't even I wasn't mad at the journals or anything. Like, I wasn't mad. Like, well, there's a lot of positive stuff in these journals, years of my life.
Yeah.
But I just felt this need. I wanted to stop looking back on it in a way where I was like using it to inform the future, maybe, or like I wanted not dwell. I don't know exactly what. I have a few different thoughts about kind of, but I was wanting to let go of this like digging back into it. And what was strange was that a couple weeks later I found the two journals that I meant to burn. Like the two journals in my mind I was burning.
That is really, really weird. That's wild.
And I was like, what are you doing here? But they weren't, it wasn't actually journals from like trauma times. That stuff went into the flames. It was journals from a recent relationship.
Okay.
And those were the survivors. I was like,
wow.
What?
Maybe you need more time with those.
But it was just like, it was interesting. But my journals from when I was, these are all journals from the last like 5 years that I had handwritten. But when I was younger, I used to type my journals. And so those are the ones I've been looking at as I have been getting ready for the show. Because that's the part of me that, not that I've forgotten, but I had such a different view of like I was reading those journals just like, poor babe, like, you know, just like, oh my God, like she's this girl, like I'm like speaking about her as if she's not me, because she's like not me. Like it's this person that is so like, it will be like something traumatic would happen, and then a couple days later a journal that's just kind of like, well, I've forgotten about that now, kind of like very like pushing things down. And clearly it's just like red flags all over these journals. They're like, anyway, I'm fine now, and it wasn't really a big deal, and actually, you know, I love my boyfriend, and la la la.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. And I'm reading, and also just like about, you read it and you see how much trauma it takes from you, because it's like 10 years of my life that there's this person who sometimes in the journals I would write like all my dreams are in there too, like all these things I wanted to do. And I clearly was this like person who wanted to be a comedian since I was a teenager, and I'm talking about it, and I'm denying it, and it's denied in the same breath that I'm denying what happened to me. And those things are not a coincidence. Like, that's what trauma takes from people. I think people don't realize, because it's a lot of times people who have it's, you know, this invisible scar. So you don't really know how it affects people. And people are so quick to say that, you know, something happened to someone couldn't have been that big of a deal. What, a couple moments of your life, you have no wounds, you're all right, you're making a big deal out of it, you're being dramatic. But the things it can take, like, I mean, that's 10 years of my life that I was so constantly bombarded with whether it's the intrusive thoughts or depression or night terrors or whatever. Like, I was not doing what I wanted to do. Like, I have been a very creative person since I was a child. I've been a writer, and I have been this person who's like should be a performer. And
Yeah.
I feel like I had to kind of, in very recent years, find that child version of myself again, like the little girl that wanted to, make people laugh and have fun on stage and let myself be that, and kind of using that to talk about trauma, because trauma is the experience that I have known a lot.
I think just to double back a little bit, I thought that was very interesting to explain how trauma and PTSD can rob people of things, can rob people of time, can rob people of their goals and their dreams. And I think it's really cool that, you're putting in the work to not allow that to happen to you, and you're pursuing your dreams. You know?
That's been what's made me really emotional. And I'm sorry, I know I can feel like I'm rattling off in this, and it's because, like, while we talked about, it's a little bit of a challenge. Talking about PTSD can be a little triggering, and then it can make you like say, like, my reaction when I'm triggered is literally to say more. Like, I will like just keep talking and talking and talking and talking. So I don't mean to kind of go on and on.
It's totally fine. I appreciate you opening up about your experience, and as someone that's doing the interview, I just want to listen,
Okay, cool.
I do at some point want to, and it'll be interesting. I want to just ask you at some point to really just explain more specifically, if you don't mind, what PTSD is, what trauma is, and stuff like that.
Sure.
I feel like it's actually an interesting way. This is interesting. The interview is going the way that it's going. You know what I mean? We've opened up. We've talked about a lot of things, but we didn't define our terms, so to speak.
Right. We never really said, like, this episode is going to be about PTSD, and I literally pulled up a definition just so that I could have an official thing to say.
And psychos, so ahead of time, Kelly told me that podcasting about PTSD may induce some level of PTSD.
Yeah, podcasting, it's literally can be a little triggering to me. So I'm like, you haven't asked any triggering questions, but a lot of times people do ask me some really absurd triggering questions, and so there's a part of my brain that's like preparing for that, and I think that's why I'm like, I'm probably really rattling off and saying like more than I even. I think a thing that can happen is you'll like say more than you even want to say, and so that's what I'm trying to be.
Well, the psychos appreciate that very much.
But okay, PTSD is a mental health condition that develops following a traumatic event characterized by intrusive thoughts about the incident, recurrent distress and anxiety, flashback, and avoidance of similar situations. It has many symptoms. Usually they come in with, people most associate PTSD with like flashbacks and invasive thoughts and nightmares and these big reactions. There's like a lot of times characters in movies that will have like a big violent reaction to remembering their trauma, but also it can be a lot of physical. It's a very physical condition in addition to how it affects you emotionally. Like, it can cause depression and anxiety and a lot of what feels kind of emotionally obvious in terms of something bad happening to you. But then trauma really lives in your body. Like it lives in places that you might not expect. Like, in addition to emotional numbness or night terrors or whatever happens, there can be a jumpiness or like physical tightness, like muscle tightness. For me, I'll have, it affects my digestion and my eating. Like I will lose my appetite or get sick, like throwing up. Some people have really physical responses just depending on what happened to them. There's, it could be come in like nightmares. It's different for people, but I think what makes, or maybe what makes anything a disorder, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist or, I didn't study this, but based on when I was diagnosed, it's kind of like how much it's like getting in the way of your life. That you can't focus at work, or like me, I can get very dissociative, and it will distract. Like it's almost like I think I was misdiagnosed, or maybe I have that as well. I don't know, but I've been diagnosed with ADD before, and then other people have said like, oh, I think that was actually the trauma, like those ADD symptoms. Or sometimes people will get diagnosed with major depression and then later realize, oh, that was connected to your PTSD or other anxiety disorders and mood. It's a little bit mysterious sometimes the way PTSD lives in the body, because it really can change the chemistry of your brain and the way your physical response to things. Like I have shaky hands, and I've had a essential tremor since I was a teenager, and I don't know why. Like a neurologist is just like, yeah, you have shaky hands now. Tell me if it gets worse. Like that's sort of like,
Yeah.
But then someone that knows I have PTSD is like, okay, when do the hands shake? Like there's a lot of, sometimes a puzzle that has to get put together, especially if you have repressed memories or the way the brain remembers things. Like with traumatic events, a lot of times people don't remember where it happened or when it happened, but they might remember the exact thing they smelled. They might remember very specific like textures, and it sucks because it makes it like if you had something happen to you, your brain is like a really fucked up crime scene in that sense of like, if you're trying, like that came up a lot with the Kavanaugh hearing, where she was talking a lot about how, she's like saying how our brain remembers this event is actually more indicative that something happened. And people will say this a lot about survivors, like, oh, she's acting crazy. The way she's reacting and the way she's talking about this. And it's like, actually, that's, to me, when I see someone like going on and on about something and kind of seeming like emotionally out of control, they seem more like they're probably suffering from PTSD than
being an unreliable narrator.
Right. It's like there's this, I was writing in one of those journals that I was afraid to post like years ago, like 10 years ago, whenever that was. I talked a lot about that, of like, I knew other people that had been raped, and I saw people I knew who had these very like fight responses, like they were like going off and telling people and yelling, and they were getting made fun of, and And I would see like, I would be like, I'm not like her. Like, I'm like this good victim, this like perfect victim who accepts an apology and is quiet and on the surface level moves on. But I'm thinking about this every day. I'm writing about it every day. I literally last week, I guess this is a theme of what I'm doing this month, but I deleted my Facebook, like not deactivated, like I deleted it so I can't get it back.
Good for you.
And it was in part because I kept like, I don't even look at Facebook, but other people will send me Facebook memories that I'm tagged in. And it's like this younger version of me that it's such like a mask. This is what happens when people ask me about PTSD and I'm like, I meant to keep it light, but
No, we don't have to keep it light. I just want us to organically go where we're going. And
yeah,
go ahead.
this is exactly, I'm like processing in real time what happens to me when I go on podcasts, because it's really, normally it comes from someone asking a question that is like too much, like someone asking me to describe what happened to me, but I realize even without that, like I'm still like going there on my own, and I think it's like that response to even it coming up in at all, like because I've been interviewed about this stuff so much that like it's sort of like once it gets, the topic gets it's like a floodgate can kind of open, and I think emotionally and literally, like, no, not literally, emotionally and verbally, like the words that come out.
Well, I mean, what I want through this podcast is honesty and authenticity, and you speaking the way that you need to speak in order to get through this podcast ordeal is fucking beautiful, and it's really appreciated. Maybe we can more broadly,
Yes.
because you know what? So so when I was on the political comedy show Redacted Tonight, I did a whole bunch of segments for that show, over 220 segments. By far, the segment that got the most hate and got like internet trolls to just dive all over me was when I did a segment about rape culture and how pervasive it is in our society.
Right.
And they went nuts on me. They called me beta cuck simp, F word.
Right.
And people don't want to talk about it. People don't want to talk about rape culture. People don't understand what it means. Are you okay with discussing your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very
Like, how would you define it, I guess? I'm sorry, or you just speak. Just speak.
Or yeah, it's I mean, it's everywhere. It's like when I think about rape culture, I think about all of the like teen movies I grew up watching that I loved, like everything I love to watch would a lot of times be around these stories of like a teenage boy trying to get a girl drunk and trying to have sex with her, sort of trying to trick a girl into like liking him or like going home with him, and always like there was such like just romanticizing romanticization of like coercion, really, like that it's romantic to kind of not take no for an answer or keep trying, and then also like in what porn people like, there's so much rape porn basically, or like rapey situations, or like infantilization of adult actors to like make them look like they're kids, and all these different things that are so normal in advertising and the movies you watch and in jokes people tell and in the way you grow up. Like I grew up with a brother my age, and we were like the classic boy girl kid dynamic of how we were raised, where like he gets condoms as a gift and I get a taser, and it's
That's
like
very telling.
very
Yeah.
like, oh well, you're gonna have sex, stay safe, get out there. And me, it's like, no boys ever allowed in your room, and get home before. It's like, don't you get yourself raped out there. But that's not like my parents. That's just like the way society is in a lot of ways, is kind of putting the responsibility on little girls to figure it out and try, don't get in the car with that boy. We know what he's going to do. Like that kind of energy. Whereas,
And then it's like your fault if you do go in the car.
right. Like I remember one time, well, I don't really want to, never mind.
That's fine. That's fine.
It was just something, well, here, I'll tell the story, but I won't say who it was. But someone in my life, when I got in a car with someone and went on a long road trip, and then it was a man that I grew up with gave me a ride somewhere, and it was a long ride. And at the end of the ride, someone I know called and was like, so how'd the ride go? And I was like, fine. I don't know. He talked a lot about politics. She's like, well, I can't believe you got in the car. Like, I wouldn't do that. Kind of like, wow, you're so irresponsible that you would trust a man. And like, if something had happened, it would have been like on me
you.
somehow. But I grew up around a lot of stuff, like a lot of things like that. And a lot of the boys I knew were raised to be like aggressively pursuing sex. I always think of that. See, I mean, Superbad was like my favorite movie when I was a teenager. But there's a scene where Jonah Hill's character is like, like when a girl gets really drunk and she's like, oh, I can't believe I fucked that guy last night. Like, we could be that mistake. And then they like decide that's their whole goal, is like to get the girls like blackout drunk so that they can have sex with them. Like that's the plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like so normal in a lot of these storylines.
And that's rape culture. I don't think people understand that is pushing that type of coercion is what rape culture is. I think people just they hear the R word and they see red.
Well, and it gets caught up in the same conversations of like cancel culture, and when people are saying, oh, that didn't age well or whatever, about like baby it's cold outside or any number of things that people are noticing the themes of. But I think misogyny, and anyone can be raped, and that's a whole another part of the conversation, that it's definitely not just women. And I think men a lot of times have to feel like they have to push down their experience. So I think, people a lot of times don't even, I don't know. That's a whole other thing. But rape culture, especially, and as it pertains to misogyny, like misogyny is so everywhere. It's like, I think people you don't notice it. Like, it's it's hard to even separate a lot of the kind of concept of rape culture with just misogyny in general. When you go to a workplace and you're like, I've been in a lot of workplaces where I'm like the woman there, kind of how everyone interacts with you. It can be, I don't know. I'm like, I'm getting to a point where I'm pausing a lot because I realize I'm like monitoring myself now to make sure I don't go down another I feel like earlier
That's cool.
I went into like a.
Well, we're doing good. I mean, we're good on time. We're a little over an hour, so we can just wrap up with one more thing. Yeah, I mean, we can talk a little bit more about your show. Rape victims are horny too, and then we can check in and just see personally. Well, that's what I wrote down. I don't know what we're going to talk about now. I wrote down what are some things personally that you want to work on to improve your mental health.
Sure.
Yeah, and then you could do that, and then just tell people about the show and anything else that you want to talk about.
Cool. Well, Rape Victims Are Horny Too is, again, a musical comedy show I've been working on for a couple years with my best bud, Dylan Adler, who's hilarious.
He's great.
Comic. And we've been working on it for a while, and I think it's interesting. Feeling triggered by doing podcasts reminds me that the show is very, I think what makes it special to us is we have a lot of control when we're doing the show. Like, we have written all these very specific words that we say on stage, and it's funny, and the show really is funny. Like, it's not like this where I'm talking like this. It's like we have written these, and I always forget because I get so comfortable being funny on stage, doing our jokes and being funny with Dylan about it. It's like, oh yeah, rape is not funny to me at all. Like, so whatever. What happens a lot is like we do the show and we've decided to be funny on stage. Yeah, that's the point of the show. But when people ask me about it, I don't think you expected this. But I think people will start conversations with me a lot about it, thinking that I'm like ready to like riff about it. And I'm really like, I have PTSD. So like what happens a lot is on like a show where we, weren't choosing to talk about it, it will come up and I will not be funny. And like, I'll feel this guilt that like, dang, it was like me and this panel and we were all laughing and then I made it sad, but it's like, it is sad. It is like this heavy experience that really happened.
Yeah. And if you happen to be something happens that you are organically funny about it, fine. But I mean, trying to do zingers.
Yeah, no,
ridiculous.
it would be silly, but I feel like I'll have this guilt about it sometimes as a comic because I'm like, I'm a person that wants to be funny and be silly. And I'm so often, almost every time I've ever done a podcast, people are, inviting me on to talk about trauma or PTSD or the show, which makes sense. But like, so there's all these podcasts out there of me like being so sad. And I'm like, dang, I'm a comedian. But, I did choose that in a way, but not to like blame myself, but I didn't choose I didn't choose the trauma, but like I do choose to go on the podcast and discuss it.
Yeah.
But the show, I'll get to a point like right now, I feel so good about it and I'm like, cool, I really arrived at like, we know what we want to say about this. And I look back at the journals of my old little self and I'm like, yes, that is how I want to talk about this. But then
That's
when I'm
awesome.
in a regular conversation, that's when
Go down rabbit holes potentially.
well, like
spiral.
PTSD is there, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like it's healing is not linear. And one day you can feel really great and feel like, wow, I've like broken through in this very cool way of like having this whole show.
Yeah.
And then the next day you can feel like, what the fuck am I doing? And both things are, I really try to make this clear in the show at the end, because I don't want people to, a lot of times because of us performing the show and some other things from my life, people will tell me I'm brave and stuff like that. And we really make a point at the end of the show to say, like, you don't have to tell your story to be brave. Like, you don't owe anyone your story.
Yeah.
Talking about it helps us feel good right now. But sometimes talking about it makes us feel bad. And you got to do what, if you feel safer not talking, you know, that's okay. If you feel like you never want to tell people what happened to you, that's okay. It's if you feel like really proud to talk about it one day and then the next day you want to delete your post or whatever, that's okay. And
Yeah.
it's the conversation isn't really, it's not really supposed to, in my opinion, be on survivors. Like, it should be, you know, like the people, when I think about the people who've harmed me, I'm like, they should be the ones talking about this all the time and figuring out how to stop doing it. But I'm talking about it because I'm the one whose brain is fucked up by it. And that's how it goes. Like, they get to go along their dandy is not a word you're not supposed to.
In that context, I think you
they
can
get
say
to go along their merry lives.
Yeah. I think this has been such an informative explanation of PTSD and trauma because so much more than just giving like the definition of what it is, because in a way this has been like a meta podcast in the respect that
I am triggered.
Yes. The fact that you've been willing to provide that vulnerability, and I really hope that I've created like an atmosphere that has been minimally triggering.
Well, yeah, I don't blame you. I feel like I've still got to figure out, like, I'm very much not an expert. I only just have trauma. I don't really, you know, I'm not.
I'm just saying, for people
but-
that listen to this podcast that are interested in learning about mental health and about all of that stuff, to be able to hear your story and you tell it the way that you do, to talk about something and having it be triggered is a real gift for people to be able to more deeply understand what's going on. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. No, you're making sense, and that is a nice way to think about it. I guess I'm thinking like my caveat of, I haven't yet figured out, like, when I feel triggered in this way, what I really want to do, in the sense like, oh, you know, when I feel this way, should I stop doing whatever I'm doing and like go breathe and put my head in the freezer and like for a second and then splash water in my face and ground myself and then come back to the conversation? Or was the fact that I like addressed it in the moment and then thought about it and continued talking enough? I don't really know. Like, I think there's a lot of tools you figure out as you work through trauma and how it affects you, like how you want to like when Dylan and I are working on the show, we trigger each other a lot on accident just by like what we bring up. And we've developed, like, we've realized rather than go through the whole conversation and like talking our way through it, we've come up with little hand signals, kind of like, it's happening. And then we pause and breathe. And he and I literally, a big thing we do is we put on a kid's song, like something like Our Inner Children would like, because a lot of healing from trauma can come with nurturing like your inner child and kind of reparenting little parts of yourself, depending on what kind of therapy you subscribe to. But we'll put on something and like kind of dance to that. And
Yeah.
I don't know, there's a lot of different ways to ground yourself, but I maybe didn't do that in this conversation, but I'll have to see what it sounds like when I listen back, because I hope
I think
at least made sense.
It definitely made sense. And for people that want to get insight into somebody who's dealing with PTSD and trauma, is a great presentation.
Well, that's good to know. But the show is very silly and fun, and part of me wishes I had just like said things from my set that are like written and
that's not what this podcast
but that's not what a podcast is.
That's not what this podcast. That's not what Take Your Pill Psychopath is about.
But the show, I promise, is funny, and we're recording an album at Caveat at 9:30 on Friday and Saturday.
What's the date on that?
The 24th and 25th of June. And
Cool.
then at some point we're going to have an album for sale. I assume wherever you get albums.
That's exciting.
And yeah, it's just like our goal is to become the Weird Al of rape. And, you know, a lot of people ask us why we're writing jokes about trauma, and it's because we want to be famous. And we're trying to record this album now before the rape stop. It's timely.
You're trying to exploit that trauma market.
Yeah, we got to get it out now.
You got to get that trauma dollar, big market. Yeah.
Yep, you know, everyone wants to hear from victims. That's what they say.
Yeah, that's
The
hilarious.
most famously listened to group of people.
Well, I think it's badass. I think it's wonderful, and I'm psyched to see the show.
Well, I hope anyone listening that was triggered turned off the podcast and didn't keep listening to it. But I hope if they did listen to it anyway, that they take some deep breaths and go, you know, chill out and take care of themselves.
Yeah, I agree. Before we go, do you want to just let people know where they can find you on social media and stuff like that?
Sure. I'm at Kelly Bachman on Instagram and at Bellycockman on Twitter. Yes, that's just the reverse spelling.
Nice.
Kind of my alt.
Well, what I want to say is truly thank you for your time, your honesty, your vulnerability, your openness, your insight. It means a lot. It's really appreciated.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Cool.
I'll try not to judge my own vulnerability.
Okay. Yeah. I think that seems like something you should have, that level of compassion for yourself to not judge your own vulnerability.
It's what's the Brene Brown says, the vulnerability hangover.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
When you open up a vein on a pod.
Yeah.
And then you're like, dang.
Well, I hope I didn't.
What did I just say?
I hope I didn't jam you up for the rest of the week, dude.
If you notice any extreme edits in this audio, that's me going back and being like, by the way, there's about 20 minutes there.
Wow.
No, there's I probably won't do that.
All right. Okay, so I just want to say, Psychos, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Once again, you get a bonus episode every week if you support me on Patreon. It's patreon.com/jfod, JFOD. Join my newsletter, jfodnews.com. Spread the word, pass this around. If you want to reach me and say hello, you can email me at takeyourpillspod@gmail.com. Again, this is Take Your Pill Psychopath, the comedy podcast that exploits mental illness for personal profit. What? Trademark. I'm John F. O'Donnell, and my wonderful guest has been Kelly Bachman. Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks.